Hey everybody, it's Lebo with Lebo's Pinball. And I just got back from Cincinnati here, 2024, and it was a great time. It was the whole weekend of December 6th through the 8th, and lots of games up there, uh, lots of great people, and just really a good time. If you've never been and are anywhere at all within driving distance or in that area, you got to go. So put it on your calendar for next year. It's always, I think it's like the first weekend or so in December or thereabouts. So keep an eye out for that. But, anyways, now it's time to focus back in on this wildlife and make some more progress. So today, we're going to start out by looking in at the shooter rod. And so this shooter rod is, it's just looking kind of rough and uh, it doesn't smooth or it doesn't move real smooth. So I'm going to do some things to try to freshen it up, make it look a lot better. So we're going to focus on that, knock that out. Once you get done with that, the next thing that I'm going to shoot for is rebuilding the flippers. These flippers, they're just kind of weak. This one plastic bat is actually cracked. Of course, the rubber bands haven't addressed those, so that'll be part of the whole rebuild. But when we rebuild this to bring it up to the original performance, we're also going to give it an extra little kick to where we're upgrading the coils on this to where we'll use what's known as the 5141, the yellow dots, or I think I may be going with the orange dots. I can't remember. We'll take a look at it when we get there to see which ones I got here. But it's going to give just a little more oomph. Don't know how much more, but it's just a little bit. After we're done with that, we're going to head back over here to the scoring reels, kind of go through some of them. They're actually working a lot better. The more that I've been test playing things, the more things are just resolving themselves. And I think a lot of this has to attribute to just a lot of the switches just kind of self-cleaning. As we looked at some of the switches earlier in one of my earlier videos, you knew that I've gone through just about every switch and clean them. Now, when I clean them, I scrub them with a contact file or little strip that's made for cleaning the contacts, but sometimes that leaves a little bit of a gritty residue. There could still be some oils if someone had ever oiled any mechanisms before where they really shouldn't have. There's some stuff like that can just cause some contamination. And it could just be also just pitting that still, even I didn't scrub out, didn't do a good enough job. But it is, the more that I've been testing it, more that it's been improving itself. But there's still some issues going on here in the scoring reel, so we're going to focus on that. And one of them, you'll see that I actually got a broken retainer that actually holds one of the scoring reels in, and we're going to see about getting that knocked out. So enough of my yapping. Let's make it happen. Starting out here with the shooter rod. Let's go. All right, so let's start taking a look at this shooter rod and what have we got going on. So first thing, it's really obviously take a look at this whole flange piece out here. It's rusted up. It looks pretty bad. You got the barrel spring here. It's also got some corrosion on it. The whole thing is just, I don't know if you can hear that, but it does not slide the smoothest. It's not, it's not horrible, but it ain't good. So, and of course we've got, the old rubber shooter tip here that we've got a new one for that to replace. So what are we going to do with it? With all that's corrosion that's on here, I can drop this in the Evaporust. In fact, that's exactly what I'm going to do, just to see how that looks. And for fun, we're going to throw this guy in from the previous video, just this really nasty socket. Not that I have any intentions to use that, but I'm just kind of curious to see how much of a difference that makes just by putting that in there, since I'm going to be going to clean this out. And it's the same thing with that barrel spring. I'll throw that in there too. However, I've got a brand new one, and we're going to go with a new one. It's not expensive, and it's available, and I've got a new barrel spring, and that's certainly not an expensive part. So in addition to that whole shooter flange, there's also the actual bushing that's for that, so we will not need to reuse the old one on that. But just out of curiosity, I want to see what it looks like whenever we run this through Evaporust. The other big thing we're going to do on this actual shooter rod there's really nothing that's actually really wrong with it. It just needs to be cleaned up and polished out. So I'm going to take you through what I do to try to polish out these rods. Definitely got one of my viewers who has asked for this, so I'm going to try to focus in on that a little bit and show what that's about. So let's get going. All right, so let's start taking this thing apart. First thing we want to do is go ahead and pull off the old rubber cap. I like to hang on to these sometimes because they make for good bulb pullers, as you saw in the last video. All right, now we got a C clip, or maybe this is an E clip. I always get the two mixed up, but it's a clip. How about that? Let's go ahead and pull this off, and we're not gonna lose it, but because we don't need to replace it. All right, let's pull off this washer. Get this one right here. We're gonna set that to the side, and can pull off the main shooter spring. Now, one thing I've already noticed, I could feel it here on the edge, and I noticed it right when I was pulling that washer off. This happens a lot. This whole little metal edge sometimes starts to flare out, and I think what causes that is all of the plunge hits, especially if you've got a rubber tip that has worn out. I've seen sometimes where the whole, let's see, like the whole end of this would have been gone, you know, cut off, just broken away. And so effectively, you're just smacking the ball, you know, you're hammering it effectively with the end of this rod. And, you know, a lot of times this will start to flare out. And when it does, that makes it sometimes hard. And it's hard to actually pull this out. So actually, I'm not going to force it too hard. What I am going to do is, I've got a file. I will end up just taking off just the edge of here that has started to flare itself out, and then this should slip right out and it'll be still good to go. So let me go get the file, and voila, here's the file. All right, so let's just kind of start working on this. Oops. I've got another file that might work better than this one. This one doesn't feel like it's cutting in too good. Let's go get the other file. Yeah, here's the other file. Oh, yeah. Having the right tool makes all the difference. Just keep kind of grinding around this edge. Yeah, it's coming. It's not there yet. All right, let's see if it pulls out. No, still got a little more to go, but I can tell it's getting better. All right, I think we're just about there. Yeah, there we go. Came right on out. Perfect. And it's not damaged or anything. It's just we had to see if I can focus in on that. It's just been, you know, smoothed out that one little edge that was catching everything. So still usable. All right, next let's go ahead and take these two nuts that are holding that whole flange assembly, or flange in. So I had loosened these earlier, so they're coming out pretty easy. But just got a couple nuts to remove. And then, come on out. Yeah, a couple things I wanted to show you. One, that there is this plate here that acts as kind of like a big washer, so we'll be reusing that. But notice when I loosen this, there's all kinds of play around here. That's actually something to watch for when you're putting it all back together. You're going to have to kind of make some adjustments of right where you want to locate things, so that when the shooter rod is hitting the ball, you really want to hit it square right on the back side of it. That'll keep the ball from spinning weird or jumping, and you just want to get the right force behind it. Let us fight me a little bit here at the end, and it's starting to come. There we go. I was afraid it might have bound up in it, would have snapped off, and if it did, well, that's okay, because we got a replacement, but it didn't. All right, so there we go. Now it's out. Ugh, that's nasty. Like I said, I'm going to throw this in the evaporust just to see how it turns out, just out of curiosity. But again, I'm not planning on continuing to use this. Um, Also, one thing I'll note, maybe see it a little bit better on the new piece, just as far as orientation is concerned, there is just a little bit of a, let me get the bushing out. Maybe hard to see from that angle, I'm not sure. There's a little bit of a tilt to how the rod is supposed to go. I really can see it with this. Let's see there. I don't know if you can see it or not. But the whole idea is when you put this in, there is a kind of like a little bit of a dugout area here. And this side had it, yeah, there it is, slightly on the side. When you go put that in, that goes down, that's towards the bottom, and it allows for the shooter rod to be angled the way that it needs to go. It's actually not exactly perpendicular to this front surface. All right, let's move on ahead. All right, here's the evaporust. Already dropped in that one piece. Now let's drop this one in. Let it sit down in there in that basket. We'll come back and look at this probably a day later just to see what happens. All right, so it is buffing time. We are going to clean up this shooter rod. This is perfectly usable. You know, like I said, noticed a minute ago, we went ahead and ground down that end that was kind of flared out a little bit. But this other end, there's not big chunks or anything out of it. It is, it's not like it's loose from the rod. It's totally usable, but we want to make it look a lot nicer. And honestly, while we're in it, we might actually buff this rod out a little bit. That'll help with just the smoothness of it. But what I basically use, I've just got this, this is regular old 8-inch bench grinder. I think this came from Harbor Freight. Relatively cheap. I mean, it's nothing real fancy. This is just a cloth buffing wheel. And I've used different compounds on it. I probably have to be a purist. I should just stick with the same compound that I'm going to always use. But what I'm using for this is basically just like a jeweler's rouge. It's another Harbor Freight special. If I can find the product, I'll throw it up here on the screen. Nothing real super fancy about it, but this one seems to kind of polish things out a little better than some of the others that I've used. But let's go ahead and get this rolling and see if we can make some progress. Slow us down for a minute. I'm going to come back to this here, but I want to just go ahead and show you. Okay, so what is it looking like here so far? Oh, well, it looks some better, but it's not super smooth. So what are we going to do next? Well, now it's time. I'm going to go get out some of the mother's polish on top of this. Let's go ahead and kind of buff this some. You can see it's certainly starting to shine up. But we're going to put a little bit of that other mother's on there and see what that does to it. And between the two, we'll get this thing looking nice. Crack open the mother's mag and aluminum polish. All right, put a little bit of this on here. Boy, this thing's warm from where I was polishing it. Tell you what. All right, let's just see how this does. And really, the bulk of it was really all that polishing we just did on the wheel. And I've got a lot more to go. I still haven't done all the inside through here and the rod. But let's just kind of see how this is looking. Gonna give this a little bit of pressure, a little buff down. Yeah, and let's see how well you can see in the camera, but it's certainly looking a lot shinier. Might go with it maybe just a little bit more, but we're gonna really focus in on this inner portion and the rest of that, and then we'll call it done. So here we have it. We're pretty much done polishing this out. So just to kind of show you how this all turned out. It turned out pretty shiny, even on there on the inside. So when you're grabbing it, it'll, it's kind of a nice smooth feel to it. The whole shaft has been polished out here too, all the way down to the end. One other last thing that I like to do after I've gone over everything here with the mothers to get it to this point is I'll actually take a little bit of rubbing alcohol and just kind of wipe it all down. It seems to be a way to kind of wipe off whatever residual mothers that was on there, because even though you'll kind of polish it out, it'll kind of leave fingerprints or whatever. So that seems to just kind of cut all that off. And now it's good to go with towards putting the assembly back together. Let's get this this shooter flange ready to go back in. Now, I mentioned earlier about how like this whole bushing has kind of got like a little tilt to it, and kind of relative to how that should fit in here. You notice again that little cutout that's on this. So with it tilting, I guess upward, the reason that that's in there is because the shooter rod is actually relative to the flange, it's kind of pointing upward. And the reason for that is this surface here and the shooting direction, it's really not perpendicular. It needs to kind of go uphill just a little bit following the playfield. So the way you're going to want to, you don't want to put it in upside down. That'll be shooting it more downhill. So we're going to have this tilting just slightly up. Let's just go ahead and kind of put this roughly in position. We'll go ahead and put this other plate back on. And then we will go ahead and just put the nuts back on the back side, just to kind of, we'll go ahead and sort of snug it up into position. But here in a minute, we'll actually be making some adjustments. Now that I have that flange kind of snugged up, and by the way, I just sort of eyeballed approximately where I saw the footprint of where it was before, just to kind of see if that looked about right, and I just snugged those the nuts on. But before we go put this rod in, we got to put I've got a new barrel spring to put in. Now I want to mention too that there's a couple, at least a couple different barrel springs that I've seen. Actually, maybe a third if you want to count some that are like brass plated or whatever. This one is, I think, measuring 3/4 of an inch, or maybe it was 7/8. I don't remember exactly. But what's important is you want to look at the old shooter spring. Like here's the old one, and match it up to make sure you've got the right length, the relaxed length of the spring. And the reason for that, it'll be a little more apparent once we get the playfield back down. But the resting position of the rod is going to depend on the length of that spring. And so if the resting position, when you're getting ready to shoot a ball, if you put in like a different spring, some others are a little bit longer, say like maybe, I can't remember if it's another 1/4 inch or maybe another 3/8 inch longer. What that'll cause is the rod will be sitting out here a little bit further, and that doesn't matter so much down on this end. It's the other end where the ball is resting and getting ready to hit. And so when you pull this back and you compress the main shooter spring and you let it go, this spring is going to slightly compress once it lands, and that's going to limit how far that rod actually goes to shoot the ball. And so, I mean, it could even be, I guess, possibly bad enough if you had one here too long, that it's already hitting this before it's even striking the ball, already slowing it down. So that's going to rob, hitting the shooter ball. So pay attention to that. If you're swapping this out, take a look at the spring you're pulling out, and well, number one, probably match what came out, unless somebody put something wrong in there before. But when you go look to see where the ball is resting in the shooter lane, it should be just where, in its natural position like this, that ball should just be, just basically touching the tip. So anyways, I want to go ahead and mention that. So now we got that in place. Let's go ahead on the other end. We can slip the spring on, and then now we're going to grab that washer. So we'll go ahead and kind of compress this. Hold up my thumb, slip that washer on. See if I can grab this C-clip without dropping it. And I might be able to, push it on with my thumb. And lastly, go ahead and take new tip. Again, I'm using the Titan silicone instead of rubber, just because I like how they're similar to, they seem similar to the way rubber performs, and they just last longer. So, all right, so now how we, seems to be moving fine. All right, now let's go ahead. The next step I want to show is putting this playfield back down, and this was that adjustment part of it. So let's kind of flip around here to the other side and take a look at what I'm talking about. And this kind of goes along with what I was talking about with that barrel spring. Sorry, my camera's getting a little bouncy. So looking at this right here on the surface, I am surprised, but it looks about already just by accident in perfect position. What I'm looking for is, notice that, you know, if I had this spring, if I had that a longer barrel spring, let's see if we were to pull it back and say that was the resting position, the tip's not even touching the ball. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back in its real position. Notice that the rubber tip is just touching the ball. That's, to me, that's just perfect. But more importantly, what I'm going to show you is where is it hitting the ball. It's hitting it, if I look straight down, you know, left and right, it's centered. And maybe a little hard to see from the camera angle here, but it appears that, you know, vertically, it's right on the money. It's right where it needs to hit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this playfield back up and go ahead and tighten those nuts, because I'm already comfortable with where they are. If I wanted to move them, or if I wasn't happy with this, all I'd have to do is just loosen those nuts. And this whole thing, there's enough degree of freedom here to kind of move it, you know, all around a little bit to kind of clamp it right where you want, tighten it down. So, but we're going to be good to go. Next, let's go ahead and move over onto doing some flipper rebuilds after I tighten this up. All right, so let's just kind of review again what's going on with these flippers and why they need some attention. So let's start out here just actually with the actual flipper bats. That's the whole plastic section of the flipper. You can see here real closely that it's actually cracked, and that's just going to get worse with more ball hits. Of course, we need new bands. We're gonna replace these bats with fresh ones. Got new ones over here. I've already got the bands already put on. So I've got some red ones that'll look nice with this game. The other thing, I'm going to go ahead and put this camera down. We'll look on the bottom side of it, and you can see what's going on. So taking a look over here on the left side, if I let's just hold this bell crank just up against this end, so we've kind of got that parked there. No, actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just hold this bottom part steady, because that'll actually show it even more. See how much movement that I have? There's slop here and this linkage where the pin goes through into the plunger, and it's also happening up here at the top too. So the sum of that causes for a lot of slop in this plunger relative to what it does to the bell crank. And the bell crank's that's what actually, you know, hits the flipper. This other side, it's the same problem. You've got the same, you know, slop, and that's, by the way, it's normal that happens. It's a wear point, and this is what gets maintenance is done to these games all the time. That's something that eventually wears and need to be rebuilt. And another thing that can break, and this one's really showing it. So I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but see how this whole this bushing that the shaft of the flipper is in, it's actually cracked down here at the base. Again, we're going to swap that out. That'll be nice and strong again. The springs that are inside here for the flipper, that side looks fine. This one looks like someone's kind of bent it around a little funny. We'll look at that. I don't know, we may have to leave that depending on how that goes, because I don't have a replacement spring, unfortunately. But I'd replace it if I actually had one. I don't, but I don't know that I need it. I think it's probably going to be okay. I may just have to make sure that I'm getting the right preload on it. And to know what the right preload is, I'm not 100% sure what the actual, what's the real rule. However, you can look to see how it was already done, but I wouldn't trust it, because it doesn't mean someone never did it, necessarily right or the way you want it. But once you get this back together, that spring should help, pull this back. And so if the flippers are bouncing kind of funny, it might be because you don't have the right amount of load on or preload on it. The other thing we'll be watching for is that you've got the end of stroke switches. So when we rebuild this, we want them to actually open those switches right here at when it gets towards the end of its stroke. Pretty good little gap there. It looks like it's probably about a eighth, almost a quarter inch when it opens it up. And we'll actually replace those switches too, put fresh ones in. So, oh, and the last thing, these, or two things. The coils, I think I mentioned earlier, we're going to swap these coils out. These coils are working okay. So there's one argument that says, hey, leave the coils alone. But this is an opportunity where I like, on some games, to kind of boost the power a little bit more. So in addition to what we're losing here and all the slop, the coils I'm switching over to, the part number is 5141, but this is what Pinball Resource calls as they've got an orange dot, which is just a little bit stronger, and then they have their yellow dot, which is even a little bit stronger than that. I'm just going with the orange dot, so it's just a touch more, so not going crazy. And then the other thing is this plunger, when it comes down, what that's hitting, you're hearing that click sound, that's where it actually bottoms out and hits a coil stop. It's basically mounted to the bracket that then goes onto the inside of this coil. So when we put in a new coil, when we take all this apart, put a new coil in, it'll also get a new sleeve. It'll get a new coil stop, new linkage. I think we replaced the bell crank, or maybe not. I think the bell crank, I think this kit doesn't have a new one of those. But definitely new bushings. Even the arms, they call it the shoe and shaft. That's what that actual plastic piece sits on, and that all of that is going to be replaced. So let's get going. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and take the wires off this coil. And it's always a good idea, just go ahead and take like a picture of the coil, or a picture of the wires going in the coil, in case you just kind of get your head wrapped around things a little funny, get things a little mixed up. You can go back to the picture and refer to it. One other thing I want to note here, I've always kind of heard that it's good practice. It's probably very minor, but it's good practice to, you can orient this coil either way, this way or that way. And it's good to have the end where the contacts opposite of where the end stop is. And the reason for that, the whole thought with that is when this is coming down and hammering, you've got that impact right there, and that, I guess it sends kind of a shock, or just a blow to that area, and that could promote possibly when it's down here, if these contacts were down that end, that could weaken things, maybe cause a failure with a solder joint or something like that. In other words, if you look at this coil, this is the way not to do it, and this is the way to do it. So someone probably replaced this coil at one point, and when they put it in, they positioned it that way. I don't know that, I'm not totally convinced that that's that big of a deal, but why not go ahead and do it right. But kind of take note of it just looking at the wiring. Like I got the end of stroke switch. In this case, it's these two sides of the coil. Over here, it's going to be over here because we got the coil flipped around, and you got the I guess this is your hot wire, and this is what I believe what gets switched. I'm probably going to say it wrong, but I think it gets switched to ground. That's what completes that circuit. I had to fire that, but anyways, that's also flipped around the other way. So let's go work on this coil. I'm going to take the wires off of this. We'll get this in the stroke switch out of here too, and just start taking everything apart. Now that we got everything actually removed, at least on the left side of the playfield, the whole flipper mech on the left side, let's kind of go over what we're doing, what we've already got prepared here. So first off, I actually don't think I even showed pulling in the stroke switches off, but so here's the one that came off. And the nice thing about this, or at least the replacement that comes from Pinball Resource, is that it's already got a new bracket, it's already riveted together on the switch stack. I guess whether, it could be just drilled out and you could just put screws in through there. And honestly, like later games, I think that's the way that they basically do it. But this is kind of convenient to where that's already assembled together. And so I've soldered on those wires. Just I could have transferred them over, but I just started with some clean ones instead of having to fight the old wires. Not a big deal. Looking up here, so this is that whole link, plunger, and bell crank that I was talking about earlier. That's going to have that slop that's in the that's actually in the linkage itself. So what I'm gonna have to do, it comes with a new plunger, but I've got to press out the pin here and move this linkage over into the bell crank. No big deal. We'll go over on the vise. Where I've kind of got things set up here to where I can just kind of position it where I can tap out the pin with a little punch, and then we'll slip in the new linkage and it'll be good to go. Looking at the coil, so this is the coil that came out of it. This is the new one we're going to put in. I'm got to feed the sleeve in from this side, not the other way, because what we're going to do is we're going to put the coil stop that was here. We'll be putting it on that side, and that's where you want the flanged end of the sleeve to go. Now, before we go putting the coil stop in, I was talking about, and by the way, this is the actual coil stop, that piece right there. This is a bracket holding it. This is a new coil stop piece that we're going to actually put in. And if you look at the old one, you'll see it is actually already starting to kind of flare out a little bit. See that end of it? And it just takes a beating. And the problems that can come with that, at least what I've seen, is sometimes, it's when it starts to get, hammered so much, it gets, shorter and shorter. It's flaring out a little bit more. Sometimes it can actually kind of grab, the end of the plunger a little bit. And it's nice that we're putting in a whole new plunger, because that means we're not dealing with one that's already been taking a beating. Sometimes that's a problem, and also being that it's shorter, it will displace a little differently than what it was designed for. So it's nice to swap that out. Over here we've got the flipper again. Here was the old flipper bat, and then what's underneath it that's called the shoe and shaft. So this shaft shoe is all one assembly. I've got a new shaft shoe that is now mounted to this new bat with a new silicone band on it. And here's that spring that I took off that I mentioned earlier. I kind of wish I had a new one, but this one's actually going to work fine. I'll just have to reposition that one underneath the new bushing that's going to go in. So let me go ahead and move on swapping out this pin, or I'm sorry, pressing out the pin so I can swap out this linkage plunger into the whole assembly. All right, let's punch this out. Let's take kind of a big one to get it down sort of flat. And let's find another one that's the right size. This looks like it probably is. Go down, not all the way. I'm gonna get enough to where I can slide that linkage out. Don't want to go all the way because it'll just make life harder getting it started back in the other side. We're close. Come on, a little more. Oh, come on. There we go. Slip that one out. Put the new one in. Actually, what I'll probably do, let's see, make sure I get this lined up about right. It's a little bit blind. Could probably take a pair of pliers. I've done that too. But let's see if we can do it this way. There we go. there we have it. So got the new one put in place, the pins in there. And so now just kind of checking, you know, that the whole slop, definitely way better. And it's, yeah, you can see it. It's a little hard. Let's see if we can zoom in on this and look. But you can see that that's, you know, it's kind of egg-shaped. It's elongated hole. That's the problem. And I'm sure that there is another one. We just don't care because we replace the whole thing. But this side, yeah, look at that. Definitely bad. All right, so let's go start putting things back together. All right, so we got that whole left side all put back together. One thing here to watch for is looking at that end of stroke switch. So when I pull the crank, see it's opening up nice. That's probably, oh, maybe 1/8 of an inch that's opening up. I haven't actually had to bend anything there. That's just the way that it's dropped in. It's about right. The other thing I wanted to point out is you also have to kind of clock, I guess that's probably the right word, just orient the flipper. You don't want it too far down and too far up. And basically what a lot of times I look for, there's a lot of games will have an alignment pin that you basically will rest the flipper on, and that gives you your point of reference of where it should be, that you just temporarily put in there, but this doesn't have that. So what I do look for is one kind of like a straight line here. The other thing, it's a little hard to do from this angle maybe, but in its most forward position, you know, will it be cradling the ball? You know, how much of a cradle? It's a little bit, maybe a little subjective, but I think I got it just about right. And so once you get that orientation in there, you're going to tighten those set screws down. The other thing you want to watch for is make sure that you don't have this thing dragging on the play field down here at the bottom. And I've got just a little bit of slop here up and down, which is what you want. There's a little gap tool that I do have, but I actually didn't use. Just as I dropped this in and started kind of just adjusting and tightening it, it really kind of fell in place. All right, so that's it for that one. It's kind of rinse and repeat on the other side, so I won't go through all that detail again. I'll just go ahead and take care of that. And then, well, I'll tell you what, after this, we've got the scoring reels in the back to really kind of focus on. That might be a little bit of a bigger deal. And I'm going to go ahead and give you kind of a sneak peek of the other little issue. So this one right here, that one's just sliding out real easily, right? Because that little plastic piece, it's broken. Normally what you're supposed to have is right here, you push this to the side and then it can slide out. But that's broken. So they don't make that anymore. However, our fine folks at Pinball Resource happen to have a pull off of I guess another machine, and I can do one of two things. I can drill out these rivets and swap out that piece with that game, or I can just go ahead and replace this whole panel here and have all of them, and then I'll take the other one out and basically swap and hang on to it just for spares in case I run into another situation. I think I would rather just go ahead and swap out this whole thing and use them all, because these all appear to be in great shape, and we'll do that. But folks, I tell you what, I'm getting tired. I'm gonna go ahead and knock out this other flipper, and then I'm gonna call it a night. But thanks everybody for watching. We'll pick it up next time on that scoring reel and see where we can go from there. See you next time.